Hello and welcome. Today we would study Hollow Men, and this is a very popular request on my channel, so I'll begin talking about the poem. This poem was published in 1925 in the journal Criterion. This journal was established by Eliot himself in 1922, and this is the journal where his most famous poem, The Wasteland, was also published. The final version of Hollow Men was published in a collection called Poems 1909 to 1925. Now, up until now, many of T.S. Eliot's poems represented modern thought that is fragmented, and he's also representing emotion states like despair, mostly despair, because he's writing post the First World War. But 1925 onwards, and especially from 1925 to 1930, his style changes to a more narrative form, and he later on also wrote plays. In fact, Murder in the Cathedral is one of his most popular plays, which is written by T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot won the Nobel in 1948, and he passed away in 1965. Now, this poem, Hollow Men, was written after the Wasteland, and both these poems, Hollow Men as well as Wasteland, suggest that traditional forms of healing, faith and regeneration are failing. So the world has become a very bewildering place, and he's articulating this in a literary form. So the images that come out in this poem are very odd and disjunct. You would see that, images don't really connect with each other. But this is to show the despair and the crisis of faith that people are going through this time. As I told you, this poem was written after the First World War, and the First World War was from 1914 to 1918. But post the First World War, across genres, there was this upsurge of expressing hopelessness through much of the literary work that these writers were producing, especially in England. So it also suggests that this hopelessness, religion is also failing at this time, but people may have embraced rational thinking, but rational belief also cannot provide complete solace to the people. Now, the poem begins with an epigraph, which is Mr. Kurtz, he dead, a penny for the old guy. Now, let me first explain to you what these two lines actually mean. An epigraph is a short quotation that is at the beginning of a book or a chapter, which is actually intended to suggest the main theme of that work. Now here these two lines are Mr. Kurtz, he dead, and a penny for the old guy. Now Mr. Kurtz, he dead, you see that it's written in a different way, Mr. Kurtz. Now, this is actually a quotation from Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. In Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, a European agent of a company is a character whose name is Kurtz. And he is in Congo for ivory trade. And the title of the novel, Heart of Darkness, is actually to suggest Congo. Heart of Darkness is actually the nation state of Congo, and which is in the heart of Africa. And here all sorts of violence and violation of humans and abuse is going on in the name of trade. And this is actually a historical fact when you look at the history of Africa, and in particular when you look at the history of Congo. And Kurtz in this novel is the head of this trade. He is represented as a hypocrite. He's a cruel man. He is very well respected in his home country, but in reality he's so greedy that he has lost all morals, and in a way he absolutely lacks a soul. He lacks any value within himself. There's no morals. So thus he's a hollow man who fundamentally believes in nothing. So when Kurtz dies, an African man announces saying, Mr. Kurtz, he dead. And so this death is actually revealed in these lines. Now, the second line, a penny for the old guy, is actually for another person called Guy Fawkes. And in England in the 16th and the 17th century, the English church, or the Anglican church, which was the dominant church, was prosecuting Catholics. Okay, And Guy Fawkes was actually a person who belonged to a group of English Catholics who had secretly planned an uprising, but this uprising actually failed. This was called the Gunpowder Plot. And this group of conspirators had planned to blow up the English Parliament, which didn't just have the politicians, but it also had an assembly of Anglican bishops in the year 1605. Now, this plot, as I told you, was called Gunpowder Plot, and when this group was caught, Fawkes was the first person who was caught, and he succumbed to extreme pain and torture, and he revealed the identities of his co-conspirators. He was later given severe punishment. Now, eventually, this year started being celebrated with the help of bonfires and burning effigies, and so children ask for money to burn the effigy of Guy Fawkes. Now, this picture actually depicts children actually making the effigy of Guy Fawkes, and this is another celebration where they celebrated by burning this effigy and also by other bonfires. Now, so when we look at the second line, which is a penny for the old guy, it is actually children asking for money to make up an effigy, which is again a traditional practice in England. Now, together, these two images suggest that hollow men lack both physical and spiritual grounding. Guy Fawkes is a body without soul, and Kurtz is Guy Fawkes is just a body, and similarly, Kurtz also, lacks any kind of, has no soul, right? So there is a spiritual emptiness and physical emptiness in both these characters, in both these historical figures. One is an historical figure, another one is a character. Now, when the poem begins, he identifies with this hollowness, and he says, "We are the hollow men, we are the stuffed men, leaning together, headpiece filled with straw, alas." Now, these are the first 4 lines. Now, when you look at these lines, you see that there's a contradiction. Hollow means actually having a cavity within, meaning that it should be empty, but stuffed is actually the opposite. But when you look at the meaning, it's not really a contrary idea. You could just be filled with something which is meaningless, and your head may be full of ideas that lack a firm grounding. So if we look at the 4th line, which is headpiece filled with straw, so basically these are people who are stuffed, but there is no value addition to these people. They just have ideas. They are filled by absurd nonsense ideas, thoughts, and these are causing them to be empty and futile. So these are empty, hollow men. Now, why does this poet create this image of hollowness? This represents a sense of hopelessness that a modern writer had, and according to Eliot, the hollow men conveyed a sense of barrenness that had filled the time, and hollowness of post-war European society was felt by many other writers, and Eliot, like many other writers, was a modernist in his time, and he's similar to the way, for instance, Woolf will also write about her times, and most of the modernist writers express a sense of hopelessness about the modern world, okay? And hollow men in particular, and as well as Wasteland, are those landmark works which mark, in a way, a beginning of this modern or modernist sense of despair. Now, the poem goes on. It says, "Our dry voices, when we whisper together, are quiet and meaningless as wind in dry grass, or rats' feet over broken glass in our dry cellar." Now, these hollow men are unable to make an impact in any way whatsoever. Now, what do we mean by wind in dry grass? Ideally, wind would dry the grass, right? Grass may inherently be a little moist, and when wind blows through it, it makes it dry. But the dry grass would not be affected in any way by the wind, so it will have the wind will have no impact on the grass, and it would be absolutely fruitless. Similarly, rat's feet over broken glass is again a provocative image. Both these images are, as I was saying, they are disconnected, and both these images are vivid as well as provocative. You are forced to think as to why would he use the image of rat's feet over broken glass. Now this image shows ineffectuality. It shows how ineffectual this whole world is for these hollow men. So hollow men fail to serve any purpose for themselves or for society, and this is another way of interpreting that there is no real emotion or sincerity in whatever they do or whatever they feel. This goes on to say, the poem goes on and it says, shape without form, shade without color, paralyzed force, gesture without motion. Now all these images are in a way oxymoronic, right? There is such a contradiction that it feels like it is absolutely meaningless. You have form before you have shape, right? You have color before you can determine which shade of a color this is. You have to have motion in order to make any gesture, right? And force can't be paralyzed. So this is completely, it's a contradiction. Now, shade without color, shape without form, all these images suggest that there is a lack of basic grounding. On the outside, it may not feel wrong, but hollow men lack a basic sense of fundamental qualities, the fundamental qualities of being. So, just like you can't have shape without form, you can't make a gesture without motion, so in a way these images represent hopelessness and meaninglessness. And now we come to another voice that talks about people who are still hopeful. Now you have seen in these lines that there is a lot of hopelessness and despair which is being projected. Now in the next few lines, he is representing another set of people. He says, those who have crossed with direct eyes to death's other kingdom, remember us, if at all, not as lost, violent souls, but only as hollow men, the stuffed men. Now this means that the speaker envies Christians or those who do not feel this crisis of faith, the people who can confront their own death without fear to reach death's other kingdom. And these people see hollow men, and here us represents hollow men. So these people see the hollow men, and they remember us, that is the hollow men. So even if at all they remember hollow men at all, they remember them not as violent souls like Guy Fawkes or Kurtz, but as empty and pitiful, creatures just leading a pitiful life. Right? So this is the image which is represented in part 1 of Hollow Men, which you can actually divide in two parts. The first one talks about the images of despair, but he ends this first part by talking about men who may have some faith, and this breed of people or this creed of people could actually be Christians. So the speaker envies Christians who do not have such a crisis of faith as he as a rational being has. T.S. Eliot's own relationship with Christianity changes over time, but in this particular poem it is a lot of despair. He doesn't show that he trusts this voice of Christianity in this particular poem, but his attitude definitely changes when he writes later on. Now this second part begins, eyes I dare not meet in dreams, in death's dream kingdom, these do not appear, there the eyes are sunlight on a broken column. There is a tree swinging and voices are in the winds singing, more distant and more solemn than a fading star. Now here, according to some interpretations, you can see two voices. One voice is of the hollow men who are leading a meaningless life because of an extreme belief in rationality, and as a result they've lost all relevance. And the other voice is the voice of belief, which for Eliot clearly, and for many other modernists, it would be an irrational voice. Now he goes on, this is how the second part begins. It says, eyes I dare not meet in dreams, in death's dream kingdom, these do not appear, there the eyes are sunlight on a broken column, there is a tree swinging. Here he talks about being judged, and this the possibility of being judged, perhaps post-death, evokes a fear in the poet. Okay, eyes I dare not meet in dreams, in death's dream kingdom. So he talks about this fear of being judged in post-death world, right? The death's dream kingdom could most likely be heaven, or it could be death or truth or reality, whatever you consider to be that threshold after which you see judgment being passed on you. Okay, something that the hollow men are very afraid to confront. But so this is the state of the hollow man. But to the believer, this fear of judgment does not exist, and he's not afraid of the eyes. He's not afraid. There, the eyes are sunlight on a broken column. There is a tree swinging. So to the believers, this is not dark and dreary, and maybe that's the reason he says the eyes are sunlight on a broken column. The eyes itself emanate a certain kind of a wisdom and emanate a certain kind of light to the world, and as the believer perceives hope, right? But to hollow men, this dream kingdom, this encounter with death only evokes fear, as we see in the following lines. Now these are lines where he is talking about the people who are still able to have faith. Now he goes on to talk about the people who can't have faith. Let me be no nearer in death's dream kingdom. Let me also wear such deliberate disguises, rat's coat, crowskin, cross staves, in a field behaving as the wind behaves, no nearer. Here we see that the hollow men do not perceive hope in any situation. The hollow men do not perceive hope in any situation. They are incapable, so they want an escape. Okay, so the speaker, who is also one of the hollow men, he is ready to be disguised just to be away from death's kingdom. He just wants an escape from this world, and he says that he can take any garb. He can actually become a scarecrow. So rat's coat, crowskin, cross staffs in a field. This is the representation of a scarecrow. So he is ready to be just be like a scarecrow, literally. Okay, behaving as the wind behaves, no nearer. So he doesn't want to confront anything. He just wants to escape this world. Not that final meeting in the Twilight Kingdom. So this hollow man is terribly afraid of the final judgment, which is Twilight Kingdom, because this is a hollow and meaningless existence which is devoid of any feeling. Now this is the end of part 2. I would go on to discuss part 3 and part 4 in my next video, but I'll just comment on the first 2 parts. Now this poem is actually quite a complex one, and many interpreters have interpreted it in various ways. I have seen this one interpretation which makes sense to me, where there is this contradiction between 2 voices that the poet actually sees. I would also link that particular video for students to watch in case that particular lecture makes sense to them. And so for people to understand these first 2 parts, you should keep in mind that modernism is a time of great despair to people, and Eliot is really sensitive to the aftermath of the First World War. And modern writers are experimental because they felt that, and modern writers are across the board, they're very experimental. So they do this because they felt that the conditions of the modern life were such that they had to start again. So authors are actually giving up on all traditional forms of structure, and that's what we see in much of the style of Hollow Men as well as The Wasteland. This is a kind of poetry which people had not seen before. Okay, so he's actually experimenting, but the reason for this disjunct imagery that he creates in his poem, that's because he feels that this condition of the modern world should be critiqued in one way or another. So this unease and discomfort and bewilderment is being conveyed through these images of despair. Now, another autobiographical aspect of Eliot is that he converted formally to Anglicanism, and in fact a conservative variety of Anglicanism, in 1927. So which means that he is going on to become a more conservative Christian in the very next 2 years, right? Just 2 years after this poem is published. Now, in his most famous poem, like The Wasteland and his Hollow Men, which are two of his most famous poems, he is critiquing this dismal state of civilization. But as we follow the trail of his own subsequent publications, we can almost trace that his personal faith grows in this journey. And maybe that's the reason many interpreters see this as a debate between the rational voice and the religious voice. Here the rational voice wins over, and we see him turn towards religious based themes in much of his later works. So this tussle between the belief systems of the Hollow Men and others who are able to have faith is his own personal dilemma in a way. I would be talking about the other two parts of this poem in another video. I'll see you again. Thank you.